Welcome to this installment of the Soil Health video series brought to you by American Farmland Trust and Cargill Region Connect. If you haven't checked out the other videos in the series, be sure to look through the options on that playlist. In this video, we'll be talking tillage, or more accurately, talking about how to reduce tillage. Soil health farmers Greg, Eric, Rorik, and Daryl will be sharing what the process looked like for them to reduce tillage on their acres. We are also joined by American Farmland Trust soil health scientist Aisha Tapp-Roth, as well as Jody DeYoung-Hughes with the University of Minnesota Extension. Enjoy!
Dealing with your soil health is like dealing with your own health. There is no one size fits all when you go to the doctor. It all depends on, everything that you do with your own body. And so it's the same thing with soil. Everybody's soil is different.
So there's different types of tillages out there, and you can have one that inverts the soil, so totally turns it over, and that would be like moldboard plow. Then you can have ones that kind of slice and dice through the soil, and that would be your coulters and a little bit on the disc. And then you have the mixing, where it turns it over and mixes in the weeds and the fertilizers and things like that. And that one is like your chisel plow and field cultivators and disc rippers, and even the discs too, because they're concave. And not only do they slice, but they mix the soil as they're going through the soil. When you're looking at reduced tillage, the definition is you leave more than 30% of the residue there. And while that's good to protect the soil, I actually like to see a lot more residue, like 40 to 50%, to help with keeping your organic matter up and also keeping the soil covered and getting those benefits of reduced tillage.
When we talk about low till, we're talking about things like strip till and vertical till, something that still gives disruption to the soil, but it's not a heavy disruption. So you're either disrupting just the very top layer of the soil, or you're just disrupting along the planting line where you're planting. You're not doing a really heavy, deep disruption. And then no-till is a lack of disruption at all. So you're just planting and that's it.
I remember when I was a kid, we'd use moldboard plows, and then in the spring we'd have to knock or work those the moldboard plowing down, you could say, and then that would consist of a disc and a tractor ride, which was a little bumpy. Fast forward to now, we do no-till, where essentially there's little to no tillage done at all. We do make an application of manure, and we use a vertical tillage tool just to lightly incorporate it. We also use that vertical tillage tool to get our cover crop seeded in a faster, more timely manner. I kind of look at it this way: is the amount of disturbance from that vertical tillage tool to, say, a no-till drill it's very comparable. Very little disturbance. The key is just to get a little cover on that seed.
Our first year farming, we moldboard plowed, ran a disc, a field cultivator, called a mulcher, and an end wheel grain drill to put our crop in the ground. So we started very much old school. Through just kind of research and study and talking with some long-time local farmers, discovered that hey, there may be other ways of doing this that might help manage our time. And that was really probably the biggest motivator at the time, was to try to cut down on the amount of time it took to get the crop in the ground.
When you're looking at going into reduced till or no-till, you'll want to prep the field ahead of time. There's three types of compaction that can happen out in the field, and one is crusting, and that's when the raindrop impact hits your soil, and you can get a pretty thick crust out there, and that's due to a lot of tillage and very little soil structure. So we're going to try to build soil structure so that won't be a problem. The other types of compaction are wheel traffic. And the way that you get out wheel traffic is usually with tillage or with years of cover crops. They can both do it. What's nice about cover crops is not only are they starting to poke through and work through that compacted zone, but they're also building aggregates so that your soil is better prepared the next time equipment's on it. And then the other thing is a plow pan. And so what can happen when you do the same tillage at the same depth year after year, what happens is not only are you taking out the structure in the top, so now you have more fine particles and individual particles, and they kind of make a layer at the bottom. Like when you toss up soil, it will settle down at the bottom. And also equipment, tillage equipment, as it goes through the soil, it presses on the soil as it's doing its job with, either mixing it or slicing it. The bottom of that shank or the bottom of the disc is pushing on the soil, creating a pan.
We came from the moldboard plow. That's where we came from. That's what I grew up with. We grew up with ditches and siphon tubes, and you cultivated 4 times and then ditched, and you disked it a couple times because the equipment that you had couldn't handle residue. And it was as simple as that. And you had this idea around that fresh smelling soil was a big deal. It's cultural. It was cultural. I mean, we're paying for sins of the past in a lot of these things. Doesn't matter if it's in agriculture or commercial business or urban sprawl, we're paying for sins of the past, according to what the definition is. It was very quickly, as we grew in size, there was no way to get across the ground. So we moved into a big disc, and then we were field cultivating.
So some of the benefits of reduced tillage, over 30% or even 40% residue, is that one is water infiltration, that you can wick down the rain into the soil a lot quicker because you have those standing stalks, and they act like straws in the soil, and they can wick in water very, very quickly. So you get that into the soil, and you don't get the ponding that you get with full tillage. And the other thing that you can get with that is now that it's in the soil can hold on to it for times of drought.
The other big thing is we have a lot of rocks in our field. And, when we were doing tillage before, I mean, you could go out there and pick up rocks until the cows come home and not even make a dent. Now that we're not tilling up that ground, we're not dealing with or seeing anywhere near the problem with the rocks that we had in the past. Looking at the cost, the amount of money that I was spending in diesel fuel and the horsepower it took to drag that iron across the field was really, for a beginning farmer like myself, cost prohibitive. So time and money were the initial motivators. But as with many things, as I studied it more and I learned more about some of these regenerative practices, it just started to make sense, right? I mean, having a living root, having something growing on the ground, having something covering the ground, protecting the nutrients and fodder from just washing off of our fields just made sense. And then when you start to think about, okay, I can no-till this and it'll cut down on the amount of horsepower I need, which means less fuel that I'll consume. That's probably going to impact my bottom line and improve my return on investment on each acre that I farm.
Some of our soils, when we do a lot of tillage, seem to have crusting issues. And the reason why is because aggregates in the soil, there's a few benefits to these. Not only do they help form channels so that water can get into the soil very quickly, but those aggregates can also act like mini columns in the soil, and they help hold up the weight of equipment. And so you have better trafficability, and you're able to hold up heavier equipment out there. I don't recommend that you keep having the heavy equipment out, but when you do need to be out there, you have better support. And the other thing that happens with crusting is the more tillage that you do, the more you just break apart those aggregates. And so now there's a little single individual particles instead of being clumped together. And when it rains, that's when you end up with the crusting issue. And it is notorious in full tillage systems. What happens when you leave the residue there, standing or laying flat, is it stops the raindrop impact. Raindrops can have a lot of power between them. It's like a little mini bomb being hit on your soil. and it can throw soil particles down slope 5 feet and on flat soils 3 feet. And the residue stops that energy from hitting the soil. And when you don't have that residue or cover crops to help, protect the soil, those raindrops and the rain that hits the soil ends up making those small particles go into the large pore spaces and causes that crusting. And it can get bad. It can get where you get a 2-inch crust and you have to go out there and do more tillage to break it up so that your seed can germinate. The more tillage you do, the more you need to do to keep fluffing the soil up, it falls back down. Ask any co-op which fields they go to spray after a heavy rain. And they will go to the no-till, strip till, ridge till the fields before they'll go to the ones with full tillage, because they know they can't get into the ones with full tillage. And I say for people who are going to start into no-till, because now you will have no tillage to be able to break up that pan, I would say get rid of all those pans ahead of time. And same with if you're tiling or doing any work out in the field, level the field before you start no-till or strip till.
Switching to low or no-till helps maintain the essential biological structures that help maintain the physical and chemical elements to soil health. So the less that your soil is disrupted, the more of these biological structures that you have. You're looking at your soil organic matter, that's composed of things like fungi and bacteria, and those have this relationship with your plants. And so you don't want to disrupt that relationship. Every time that you come through and you disrupt the soil, you're disrupting those relationships and you're having to start all over again. So what happens with low or no-till is that you are decreasing the disruption to those soil structures.
What we've seen moving from tillage, away from tillage to kind of a no-till scenario, we've seen that the soil seems to be healing itself. We actually see more earthworms since we're not really destroying their homes every year. So it's kind of a nice thing where we're actually kind of including them, and they're here and they're helping us out. But the soil itself, I mean, I think we've seen less of the blockiness and more kind of a granular structure, especially with like I've mentioned in the past, the various cover crops we've used. Infiltration seems to be increasing, and planting, it seems like we've been able to get out there and do it in an easier fashion.
When a farmer is dealing with heavy crusting or compaction, a lot of times they use that as a reason why they need to do this heavy tillage, because a lot of times it's the only thing that's allowing them to plant. And I think it's important to help them understand that there are other methods that they can use to help decrease that compaction and crusting that will actually benefit them over time. Because what's happening with this tillage cycle is that you have this extreme crusting or compaction, you heavy till, it breaks up that soil into smaller pieces, it kills all of the essential microbes that were helping to hold the soil together to give it structure and to allow water penetration, and it compacts again over time. So over that season, as it rains and you drive your equipment over it, you're taking those smaller pieces that you've created and you're smooshing them into each other.
So I do feel like the reduced tillage and cover crops has increased the water absorption and water availability in the soil to hopefully make the water available longer for the crops, and then basically just hold it longer as well.
When we are working with new farmers on our soil health trials, we focus on cover crops, but we want to make sure the first thing that we recommend is that our farmers switch to low or no-till before we start implementing the cover crops. And that's because, the cover crops are going to give you some benefits. They're going to help increase your soil organic matter. They're going to help increase your aggregate stability. But then when you come through with this heavy tillage, you're ripping all that up and you're destroying what you were hoping to gain. So if you are spending money to implement another soil health technique like cover cropping, but you're still heavy tilling afterwards, you're basically wasting your money. You're throwing your money away. You've just reversed all the benefits by ripping up that soil.
Yeah, so that's kind of an always evolving challenge, trying to pick the goals that meet our farm's needs. But, we really like the strip tillage concept, going to corn, planting our corn in the strips. I'd like to find a more efficient way to incorporate the cover crops in between the strips. Ultimately, we'd like to be about 90% of our acres in a strip till, minimum till on the corn. And then on the soybean side, it's kind of, open right now, but I wouldn't mind switching and going, getting 75% of our acres into a minimum tillage concept.
Another consideration when you have a lot more residue out there is you're not just changing out your tillage equipment, you're also going to be changing your weed shifts. The weeds will shift. If you do a lot less tillage, you're going to get more like dandelions and mare's tail out there. And that's going to take a different management than if you just had your full tillage that can take out a lot of those early growing weeds. And also your fertility can change. So if you're going to band apply fertilizer versus broadcast incorporate, that also takes a different management set of skills. So it's something that you have to keep in mind, that it's not just changing equipment, it's also changing a lot of other things that are attached to farming.
I will say that when you're talking about disruption to the soil and the biological functioning of the soil, no-till is kind of the gold standard to not be able, or to not disrupt the soil at all. However, sometimes that's just not feasible, especially when you're getting started with a decrease in tillage. Sometimes you've got such heavy compaction that it's not possible to start with no-till. So sometimes you're going to have to do low-till for a while and then switch to no-till.
Tillage on our farm, it's evolved again, and it's actually kind of gone backward, right? We started with full tillage. Since then, we've gotten away from all tillage entirely, and gone to the opposite extreme and really allowing a cover crop to do the tillage work that we need to do.
When you transition to no-till or to a reduced till system, you can take it gradually, or you can do it all in one big step. I am more of one that, you try something new every year. There are people that can totally jump into it and make it very successful, but it's going to take a lot more management and paying attention to that field and your equipment.
So the recommendation that I would give to a farmer who is thinking about making this switch is they shouldn't expect a quick turnaround. It's not unusual to see a drop in yield over the first few years. In fact, I think studies say that it takes about 5 years to really see these benefits, these soil health benefits like low compaction, better soil aggregate stability, water infiltration, that you get to see those in about 5 years. So when you're starting to make that switch, do it in short bursts, do one field at a time, 2 fields at a time, don't do the whole farm at once. And then slowly over time, integrate your farm into low or no-till. You will start to see these benefits.
One of the best things you can do when you're looking at no-till or strip till is find a farmer nearby who's doing it. Attend conferences that have farmer speakers. The NRCS has now made it a soil health initiative for the US. And so they are getting trained every year. They have quite a few trainings, and same with soil and water, to get better and better at soil health and reducing tillage and adding cover crops. And so they can be a really good resource as well. Another way that you can do this is find a farmer nearby or a co-op there are co-ops out there with strip till machines, then rent it done on your field so that you start getting a feel for it before you purchase that equipment. And it's also good to have a farmer who knows how this works, because I think it's very important to have a mentor or be able to talk to somebody about, hey, I'm seeing this, is this normal? Or they may say, you know, if you would have gone a little shallower, or if you would have changed your fertilizer, you know, they can help you tweak that system so it can be successful.
Thank you for tuning in to our soil health video series. If this is the first video you've watched, be sure to check out the other videos on the playlist. For more information about Cargill Region Connect or American Farmland Trust, the teams bringing you these videos, follow the links in the video description. As always, thank you to our technical experts and farmers for sharing their time and knowledge to continue promoting soil health in agriculture.